Life and energy are deeply connected. One cannot exist without the other. No, I'm not trying to preach anything, and no, I am not trying to make you join a cult. So what do I mean when I say that life and energy are deeply connected? Well, without energy, we are unable to run, eat ice cream, and, well, be alive. We derive our energy from the food that we eat every day. This food gets broken down into many things, including glucose, which is then utilized by various complex processes to form ATP. Following this logic, if or when we do not eat, there should be no source of blood glucose, and so no way to form ATP. But then how are we still able to go for a morning run after 8 hours of fasting during sleep? Why is it that we do not turn into a completely useless lump when we are not actively eating? We have polysaccharides to thank for that. Polysaccharides sounds familiar? Before your mind wanders to words like polygamous, polyandrous, polyamorous, let me stop you right there. Polysaccharides is not a term that you can use to float the idea of being in an open relationship with your significant other. So what are polysaccharides? A polysaccharide is a term used to describe very large carbohydrates found in animals, plants, and microorganisms. A polysaccharide contains many monosaccharide units in chains that are bound together by glycosidic bonds. Carbohydrates that contain more than 10 monosaccharide units fall under polysaccharides. Now, polysaccharides can be split into different groups based on the type of monosaccharide present, whether the chain of monosaccharides is branched or unbranched, and the number of monosaccharide units present. Many types of polysaccharides exist in nature, with each having its own unique structure and function. There are three main types of polysaccharides that you should know all about, and they are starch, glycogen, and cellulose. But why these three specifically and not others? It is definitely not because your instructor tipped me off on some questions for your finals, believe me. We discussed these three because they are the most abundant polysaccharides with the most important functions. Polysaccharides have two major functions in all living organisms: storage of energy and providing structure. Animals, bacteria, and fungi need polysaccharides to store glucose in the form of glycogen for later use. Plants, on the other hand, have two major forms of polysaccharides. One of them is cellulose. Cellulose is essential for plants to have structural organization. The other polysaccharide is starch, which plants use to store energy. Now let's dive in a little deeper. Starting first with how humans store glucose, we'll discuss glycogen. Glycogen is a highly branched polysaccharide that all vertebrates use to store glucose. There are two main types of bonds that link glucose monomers together to form glycogen. The alpha-1,4 glycosidic bond forms a linear chain, and the alpha-1,6 glycosidic bond is responsible for the branched chain linkage. If we look at a glucose molecule, the carbons are numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, starting from the aldehyde carbon, or CO. So in the alpha-1,4 glycosidic bond, the number 1 carbon on one glucose molecule is bound to the number 4 carbon on the adjacent glucose molecule. Whereas in the alpha-1,6 glycosidic bond, the number 1 carbon on one glucose molecule is bound to the number 6 carbon on the adjacent glucose molecule. And it's thanks to the placement of the carbons and where the bonds are happening that glucose monomers are able to stick together in a linear and branched fashion. After a heavy carbohydrate-rich meal, our blood sugar levels rise. And this rise in blood sugar is responsible for the synthesis of glycogen by a multi-step process termed glycogenesis, which is under the control of multiple hormones including insulin and glucagon. Glycogen thus formed is stored mainly in the liver and muscle cells. During periods of fasting between meals, blood sugar levels decline, and this is when the body uses glycogen to derive glucose. In a process called glycogenolysis, glycogen undergoes breakdown by the action of different enzymes, such as glycogen phosphorylase and debranching enzyme that strip off glucose monomers one by one. But there is a limit to which our body can use glycogen for energy. On average, the human body contains 600 grams of glycogen. This number can be higher or lower based on a person's mass, diet, and fitness. Both muscles and liver glycogen stores begin to deplete a few hours after fasting, and this rate of depletion is higher during periods of exercise. Now, enough about glycogen. Time to talk about the plant analog of glycogen, starch. Starch is a glucose polymer that plants and algae use to store energy. Any excess glucose that plants make from photosynthesis gets stored in the form of starch within tubers, roots, twigs, fruits, and seeds. Starch is made of two types of molecules, amylose and amylopectin. Almost 90% of starch is made of amylopectin, while the rest is made of amylose. Both amylose and amylopectin are formed from thousands of glucose molecules bound by a alpha-1,4 and alpha-1,6 glycosidic bonds. The difference between the two lies in their structure and function. While amylose is small and lightly branched, amylopectin is heavily branched, larger, and makes up the structural framework of starch. Starch is the most common form of carbohydrates that humans eat on a daily basis. It can be found in almost all staple foods, including potatoes, rice, wheat, maize, and many more. Starch is a truly fun topic to discuss, not just because it's what we use to produce beer and whiskey, but also because all those yummy chips you love to nibble on when watching YouTube are full of starch. Moving on to the next polysaccharide, cellulose. Cellulose is a plant polysaccharide and is made up of thousands of glucose units linked together by a beta-1,4 linked D-glucose units. As mentioned before, cellulose is important because it is the molecule that provides structure to plant cell walls. Apart from plants, cellulose is also found in algae and bacteria. Humans cannot digest cellulose because we lack the enzymes necessary to break down the beta-acetyl bonds found between glucose monomers. There are only a few mammals such as cows and sheep that can digest cellulose, as they contain an enzyme called cellulase, which is able to hydrolyze cellulose. Cellulose-rich plants are considered to be highly beneficial for gut health. That is because cellulose is an insoluble fiber, meaning that if we cannot absorb it in our body, we have to get rid of it. And you know where things usually get out, right? So cellulose can help support normal bowel movements if consumed. Besides helping us poop better, cellulose is used in the production of paper. Yeah, toilet paper even. Wow, we had to end this video talking about poop. Really? Alright, click on the video here to learn more about monosaccharides, the structural units of what we just covered, polysaccharides. I'll see you in the next video.